Welcome to the Time for Heroes podcast. Right, on the podcast today, I've got James Walsh, frontman of multi-million selling band Starsailor. So James has got a solo album coming out the 30th of January. We're going to talk about that. But what I like to do is go back to the start. So what was life like for a young James Walsh growing up?
Yeah, not too bad, to be honest. I think fairly typical. Had a pretty good childhood. Both my parents are teachers. Grew up in Chorley in Lancashire. Like a lot of young kids, I wanted to be a footballer and play for Liverpool. But that a lack of any sort of natural skill kind of paid to that ambition fairly quickly, and then became interested in music as as a form of enjoyment and something that I saw as a career. I suppose, like in the early days of Britpop, around the middle of high school. Although I've been singing in choirs and in the primary school choir, in the high school choir for a number of years before that, but didn't. I guess I kind of grew up in an environment where it wasn't cool to say that you sang in the choir and you enjoyed music, or you excelled in music. So I definitely feel like Britpop and the Charlatans and Oasis and their kind of Pulp, obviously, Blur, all Supergrass, all those bands, that made it a lot cooler to pick up a guitar again and form a band.
Yeah. And am I led to believe, did you start out on the piano?
Yeah, yeah. I didn't last that long on the piano, to be honest. I just did a few lessons, learned the basics, and quickly moved on to the guitar.
Right. So what sort of music were you listening to? Was it specifically Britpop? Was there anything maybe older? Was there any influences for your parents?
Yeah, my dad had a pretty good record collection. So I guess Neil Young is one of the first artists I became aware of, because he had Harvest Moon and the Unplugged album and Harvest. And I guess, like a lot of kids growing up in the Northwest, you're just constantly aware of the Beatles as well. You'd learn like Yellow Submarine and Obla Di, Obla Da, all the kind of almost children's all together now. All the sort of Octopus's Garden, children's Beatles songs before you become aware of the sort of deeper songs and the politics and the whole sort of Beatles world. So I guess those were the early influences.
And then at what stage did you think you were going to do music? Like, what was your ambitions and influences as a youngster? Obviously, you mentioned football, but realistically, what else was there a route of work that you were going to get down, or was it music solely?
I was just really focused on music once I got the bug. I had a few part-time jobs, like did pot washing in a local pub, worked in WH Smith's and HMB, but never really got any further than the shop floor kind of thing. So I think the only thing that I had passion and ambition to kind of excel in was music. So I guess if it hadn't happened, I'd just be just to have a job somewhere, try and earn some money to buy music, I guess. There
So,
wasn't a plan B, really.
So you went to music college in Wigan, is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've had a lot of guests on, even now, like the younger ones coming up, for around about that area that have went to that college. So it's obviously got a good standing. And if you look back on the alumni, like for nowadays, right back to yourself. So how did how did the music college help? Obviously, you met the band there, didn't you?
Yeah, I guess they always encouraged you to use the rehearsal rooms and the studio, and kind of gave you the sort of freedom. It wasn't the most formal places, so there was a lot of freedom to learn and try and pick things up yourself. The more kind of the music theory and music management and all those kind of things were things that I didn't really do that great in. So it was good to to have the other side of the course that was very creative. And I think most of the staff as well were ex-musicians, or not to
Mhm.
say ex-musicians, you're never an ex-musician. People who'd sort of toured before or had some experience in the industry. So they were good, but they would sort of push you sometimes, and it's good to have that kind of nice balance of giving you some freedom, but also trying to get the best out of you, really.
And you says there that you didn't really excel at maybe like the management side and all that sort of stuff. Do you
Mm.
think, like, looking back though, like now as a solo artist and an independent artist, do you feel that that's now that that sort of stuff's helped you?
Yeah, I think so. I think I quite enjoy doing the solo stuff because the expectation's a lot more realistic, and it's so much easier to put something together, like record a lot of stuff at home, and then there's no pressure to kind of recoup on a massive marketing campaign or recoup on sort of 5,000 records that we've had printed. It's all very sort of low key, and yeah, it's just a nice little thing to do, and a nice outlet for all the creativity, whereas the band is something that takes a bit more planning, and there's more opinions involved, and planning tours, planning albums. It's obviously a very satisfying feeling when all that hard work comes together, but the solo comes together a lot quicker, and and because I don't kind of expect it to be massive or anything, every little comment or even just every person who buys an album is a real, it means
Yeah,
a lot, 'cause
yeah,
they've had to,
absolutely.
I suppose, once you bring in like labels and marketing, and um, there's an element of getting in people's faces, whereas the more organic what you do is, almost like people have to find you, or people find you just purely because
Yeah,
a clip
and
of you singing a song has spread a little bit, and I think there's something quite nice about that.
yeah, because if people find you, it means that they're into the music and they want to hear more. They want to be invested in it. So yeah, I totally get that. So I mean, going back then to kind of Starsailor kind of forming, obviously originally called Waterface, and then the name changed to Starsailor in honour of Tim Buckley. Obviously, you mentioned George, Neil Young.
Mm.
Tim Buckley, another one of your heroes, or was that more for one of the other members of the band?
Tim Buckley and Jeff Buckley are a big influence on me, both unbelievable voices. I guess quite sort of serious musicians in a way. There wasn't there wasn't a great deal of swagger. Oh, Jeff Buckley's got would used to have the look of a kind of film star in a way. There wasn't a great deal of swagger about him. He was more disciplined about the music and amazing on stage, but it wasn't. He didn't sort of strike me as the kind of person that was like up to all sorts behind the scenes, or trying to build up any kind of myth. It was very like what you see is what you get kind of thing. And Tim Buckley was another sort of interesting character, but obviously succumbed to the demon drugs in the end.
That's I watched the Jeff Buckley documentary a couple of months back, and it's really good. Have you seen that?
No, I'd love to watch it though. I think
That's a cracking watch, because obviously back then, like kind of when yous were out, a lot of the bands were kind of mentioned Jeff Buckley as an influence. It must have been around about that time. He must have influenced so many of your kind of peers.
yeah, I think his music was so unashamedly emotional as well. I feel like it was quite unique in that period because everything else was quite, like I say, like, don't get me wrong, it was an amazing time, and Oasis put on some unbelievable shows, but there wasn't a lot of vulnerability in what they did. It was very like, we're the greatest thing on earth. And I feel like maybe there was an element of that to what Jeff Buckley was doing, but it was always juxtaposed with a kind of, like I say, like a vulnerability, and there's a sort of desperation in his voice where he's sort of a kind of longing, which
Mhm.
I think modesty, I suppose, which can often the same with Nick Drake. It can often produce some of the best music because there isn't a point, you'd never reach a point where you think, "Oh, this is amazing. No one's ever going to beat this." There's always an element of like, is this good enough?
And that's everything you're mentioning, all of that's captured tenfold in that documentary. It's phenomenal. So I like mentioning like vulnerability. When you kind of came on the scene, tail end of Britpop and like in between Britpop and kind of like the what is it they call it, indie sleaze, like the Strokes and all that. So you were kind of in the middle of that. It with bands such as Embrace. Obviously, Embrace was probably the first band that I was like a big fan of, and they're kind of similar in the vulnerability aspect. They sing. There's a lot of songs with the same sort of themes as yourself. So, in that kind of scene that you were in, did you feel comfortable in that? Did you have a lot of dealings with other bands?
Yeah, paths have crossed with Embrace on quite a few occasions. We've done loads of gigs with them. We played at the Peace Hall with them not too long ago. I really get on with particularly Danny. Danny's a bit more introverted and
Hmm.
keeps himself to himself, but uh, Rick McNamara actually produced the last two, not yeah, the last two Starsailor albums.
Right. I didn't know that.
And yeah, he's an amazing person to have in the studio because he's learned his kind of production chops, but he's obviously a member of a band, so he knows he's got that musical sensibility as well. He knows when to kind of bring that in and when to be the producer and when to be the sort of fifth member of the band. Turin Breaks as well, really nice lads. Guy Garvey, I've met a couple of times and always got on with him. He's like a bit of a kind of elder statesman now of all the sort of Northwest musicians. He's got this kind of, even though he's probably not that much older than me, he's got
Yeah.
this sort of wise old uncle thing about him, like
It must be the beard or something that makes that.
always holding a nice glass of red wine. And we just toured with Ed Harcourt, who I'm a big fan of as well, and sort of discovered around the same time we were taking off. So yeah, there's still a lot of connections that are still there. Andy Dunlop from Travis has
Hmm.
done a load of gigs with us over the years. We get on with all of them as well. I think
Yeah.
it's definitely a fairly harmonious. If there was a sort of scene of bands of like that kind of melodic indie acoustic music, it's a fairly harmonious little community.
Yeah, I don't think
You know,
any of were. I don't think any of were involved in like the bazaar section in the Sun or anything like that. You were all quite kind of tame compared to what it came before yous and then after yous.
yeah.
It's funny you mention Ed Harcourt because he came up on. I said I was speaking to a French musician, Melanie Payne, and I think Ed Harcourt and her sang a song on her album in 2014. She's a French
Mm.
singer. So that episode's it. That episode will be out before you. But it's funny how Ed Harcourt's come up a couple of episodes next to one another. Because I think he is.
Yeah, he's
Sorry, on you go.
no, I was just gonna say he's just an amazing musician and a bit of a kind of polymath where he's able to kind of put on a different hat to whoever he's working with. So he's produced a couple of albums with Sophie Ellis Bextor, and
Hmm.
um, he's worked with he makes quite heavy music as well. With he's worked with Afghan Wigs and uh, I think Mark Lanigan as well before he died. So he's
Hmm.
an amazing musician. He's got a great little studio in near his house as well.
So, you touched on like kind of Oasis and all that. Your debut album was recorded at Rockfield, the same as Oasis. Obviously, you mentioned the Charlatans as well. Big fans of the Charlatans, Oasis, things like that. It came a point though where Noel Gallagher, you were an end of one of Noel Gallagher's quips, as he used to do back in the day, slagging off bands. You were obviously weren't alone in that. There's so many that between the two of them they're slagged off. So how did that feel for you as like a fan of the band to then kind of be on the end of that? and how did you deal with it?
Probably it was quite hurtful at the time, to be honest, because you don't feel like you're behaving in a way of like that's so antithetical to what they're doing. It's weird. It's like you almost expect it if you kind of present yourself as something very against what Oasis were doing, but we were just playing gigs and like another band from the Northwest, kind of
Yeah,
trying to, not obviously not exactly sounding like Oasis, but so it did feel like, where's this kind of come from? But in retrospect, probably overreacted to it. Like you say, it's easy to say in hindsight, but don't think I would take it so personally next time, and I just
yeah,
try and ignore it. But we've met up with Liam a couple of times since, and always got on with him, and um, yeah, we always no, I've not had any dealings with Noel since, but I've always and really admire what Liam's done with his solo career as well. He's
yeah.
really proved himself outside the band, so yeah, it's a bit of a enjoyed their little triumphant victory lap just recently.
Yeah, yeah, it was brilliant. It seemed to kind of unite the country and kind of give that bit of good feeling back for a summer.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like I think the only sort of shame is that all those people who came out of the woodwork almost, who maybe haven't been to a gig in 10 years, kind of
Hmm.
turned up at these Oasis shows, which is understandable, I guess, because they were so massive and such a cultural phenomenon. But you do hope that some of those people realize that there's loads of bands that
Yeah,
tour all the time, and you can have just as good a night down at the, maybe not so historically significant, but you can have just as good a night down at, say, try and think of a good sort of
yeah.
King Tut's in Glasgow. Have just as good a night watching
Oh,
a,
yeah, you can have a better night in King Tut's and
yeah, like Heaton Park or Murrayfield or whatever. Get down to King Tut's and watch an up and coming band, or even the bands that come through the Barrowlands and places like that. Manchester Academy, the Charlatans tour frequently. That's we've mentioned them before. That's an amazing night. So it's just you just hope that like you say, that resurgence of good feeling towards that kind of music and even that era kind of has some sort of ripple effect to up
yeah.
and coming guitar bands and other guitar bands of that ilk.
So, I mean, going back to yourselves, obviously, the first two albums both made it to number two in the charts. Six albums in total, every one of them made the top 30, but obviously the first two albums, number two. Obviously, the debut album, I Can Mind It, NME Champions, you were one of the kind of, I think you got voted the brightest hope or something, the brightest hope award with NME. And then the second album, initially working with Phil Spector. So how was that working with him? I know there was only a couple of songs made it onto the album, is that right?
Um, yeah, it was quite a strange experience, as you can imagine. So the two songs that made the album were both recorded in the kind of early sessions where the label insisted that we did a week with him because he hadn't really recorded anything for such a long time. The label insisted that we did a week with him to kind of see how it goes because they saw it as quite a big risk to get him on board. And those songs turned out amazing. So that's what led to him being put in place to kind of do the album as a whole. Then I think his kind of mental health deteriorated and it became quite a dark sort of chapter. But just from our experience, we found it quite difficult because he became very hard to communicate with. So we were used to working with Steve Osborne did the first album and he was quite maybe at times maybe too much, but a lot of the time it was good to have a kind of school teacher-esque figure in the studio who kept us in line, who would like keep us disciplined and sort of keep us on the right path really. I don't mean we were off sort of doing anything too naughty or anything. But just like when you're kind of 19, 20, you're easily distracted by
Yeah.
the football on the telly or the PlayStation or maybe thinking, oh yeah, we've got that. We've done a couple of takes and Osborne was quite strict and he'd say like, no, we need to stay disciplined and he got the best out of us in a way. Whereas Phil Spector was kind of hidden up in the control room and um, left us to our own devices a little bit, but then wasn't happy with what we'd come out with, and
Right.
just a tense experience. And then obviously he went and murdered that Lana Clarkson, which was just shocking and terrible tragedy.
Yeah.
Really.
And then from that, he then went and worked with John Leckie, who's produced so many albums, so many bands that I like. So how was it then working with him after that, and how did he help to kind of complete the album?
It's great working with John. I think he's very laid back in the studio. Um, Again, like quite different to Steve Osborne, where he would kind of let us do our thing, and then I guess the magic with him is what he does with the raw material, whereas maybe Steve was a bit more. He pushes and pushes until he had us doing what he needed us to do. I think John Leckie kind of let us do what we wanted to an extent when he was happy with the song, but then he'd just mix it into a bit of magic.
And obviously, you mentioned the Charlatans, so around about that time as well, Mark Collins joined the band as a touring member for a bit. So how was it having somebody like that you'd looked up to then be standing on stage with you?
Uh, Fantastic. I still have to kind of pinch myself sometimes because I do quite a lot of stuff with Tim Burgess as well. I did the merch market recently, and he always says hello when you bump into him at festivals and things. Um, and sometimes I remember the teenager kind of that I was sort of running back to the train for the train back to Chorley from Manchester
Hmm.
after watching them at the Apollo or at the Academy or wherever, and it's quite surreal to regard a lot of these people who I went and bought the albums of as a fan and kind of dreaming of playing these kind of places are now you sort of now regard as peers and people who are on the end of a phone. Is just incredible, really.
That's kind of similar for me with this, like with the podcast,
Mm.
because the amount of people that I speak to that I've listened to through their careers, and you think, I'll never get to speak to them. And then I've spoke to so many people that I would
Yeah.
never, ever get the chance to have these conversations. So it's a brilliant kind of privilege to be involved in people's worlds like that.
Yeah. If it feels like a lot of this sort of journalism and podcasts and blogs and things like that, it does feel like that a lot of the people behind them, it's for the love of the music and the artists. And there was maybe a bit too much, I think, in some cases in the at the NME and Q. And I guess it's important to have a balance. You don't want everything to be too positive all the time. I think there was a lot of negativity, and there were a lot of journalists who maybe thought they were above the bands.
Yeah.
Whereas like I say, the new kind of scene around music is people who love it and want to champion the people that they speak to and the albums that they review and stuff.
Yeah, totally. Uh, and then after that, the next album on the outside, a bit heavier sound on that, and then off the back of that, you ended up supporting the Rolling Stones. So, what was it like supporting them? And I think I've had somebody on the podcast years ago that supported the Rolling Stones and said they had to pay for all their tickets. They had to pay to watch them at the side of the stage. I don't know if that's the same experience you had with them.
No, we I'm sure I think we had to pay if we wanted anyone else to come.
Right.
Yeah, we had to pay like friends and family. They didn't give us any guest list or anything. I'm sure the manager and the agent, well, the agent definitely um, would have been there because he was the agent for the Stones as well. I'm sure the management and the label would have managed to blag their way in because they always do. um, but yeah, the it was an amazing experience, but it's very different to when you support someone in a theater or something because you often have you'll have a dressing room next door and see them going in and out and you say hello and you're part of the same backstage area. But in a stadium. I think we must have had like the officials' rooms or something as our dressing room.
Right.
So we were miles away from the Stones. They were like completely other end of the stadium. But what was nice was they put together like a little official kind of meet and greet thing where we got they took us over to where their dressing room area was. We got to shake all their hands and they took a little picture. But this was prior to camera phones or
Mhm.
anything like that. So we just had to wait until the Stones kind of emailed us this picture that they'd taken. But I quite like that because I think part of the thing of like supporting a big artist is you want to get that little memento, you want to get that picture
Yeah.
or, or something to say that you've done it and to show the grandkids kind of thing. And it can be quite nerve wracking thinking, oh, well, I don't want to disturb them at this time. And oh, I don't want to disturb them while they're having the dinner. And I don't want to disturb them so soon before the gig. I don't want to disturb them after the gig. So you end up not getting these things because you so to have a sort of organized event, so to speak, like that just made life a bit easier. And I'm not one of the people who necessarily wants to chew Mick Jagger's ear off about this, that, or the other, because I'm sure he's heard it all before. I'm quite happy to kind of
Yeah. I
get
think if you have too
get you.
much time, if you have too much time with these guys, you end up making an arse of yourself. So you're better just kind of keeping it brief, ain't you?
Yeah, exactly.
And then from that, another album, All the Plans, and then no long after that, the kind of band went into hiatus. So, what was the reason for hiatus? Was it just band members going to have families and things like that?
There was an element of that. I think a big part of it was because it felt. I think All the Plans was kind of our last major label album,
Hmm.
and it felt like there was a lot of momentum behind us because we'd managed to get Brandon Flowers to appear on one of the tracks, Tell Me It's Not Over. And because of record company politics, it ended up not coming out. And it was so transparent that the support and the momentum and the kind of the wind in our sails for this record just completely dropped out as soon
Hmm.
as the label realized that they didn't have this massive hook to hang it on. And I think we felt quite despondent after that. We thought, let's not rush into another album because we need to sort of regroup and reassess kind of where we want to be and where we want to go and where we go from there. And then it just kind of ended up lasting for a few years.
Yeah. But
But I think in retrospect, it was probably the right thing to do because it just came back to it a lot fresher and
mhm.
got things out of our system and stuff.
So, like in those years, obviously, you started releasing your solo material. What are we up to? What's this album? Is this your sixth? Is your seventh album that's coming out?
Good question.
But obviously, you've done these albums with this. What is it, Greg? Can't mind his second name. But you've done like a
Hatwell.
couple with him. Aha. So I don't know. Would you include them as your albums or?
Yes, it's quite an interesting experience that because you it's basically like library and production music. So you get these sort of publishers and people, TV and sync companies who ask for a set of songs in a certain style or in a with a certain mood. And I suppose I get a fair bit of work doing that because I treat it with the same integrity as I do anything else I do. And I think a lot of people maybe treat that sort of music quite cynically and a kind of box ticking exercise. But still, it is a less sort of personal approach than my more kind of traditional studio albums that I've released.
And I mean, listening to them, the one distinct thing for your solo material and obviously Starsailor is the voice. The voice is always there. I think that's what led me to Starsailor right at the start was your voice on those early songs. So do you feel your voice has evolved, or do you think you've just went in a steady kind of incline with it?
Yeah, I think it's got stronger to be honest. There's maybe a few notes that I can't hit anymore, but I think the sort of power in my voice and the range is probably better now because I've got a lot more. I'm a lot better in my lower range, and yeah, it's just I guess your voice just kind of matures, and I think you can sort of hear. I suppose it grows with the audience as well. It's like the audience that you have when you're a band in your 20s is the same age, and they want to hear, I guess, someone echoing the sort of angst and the desperation that they're feeling. And then when you get into your sort of 40s, you want to hear a singer that's a bit more kind of weather beaten and worldly wise. Again, there's sort of no one better at that than Guy Garvey, that kind of thoughtful, poetic thing of, yeah, music becomes a bit more reflective because you've got so much to reflect on.
And then, like, coming back with Starsailor in 2017, I mean, you'd done so much in that 8-year period, but then coming back with the band on the Cook and Vinyl label, Cook and Vinyl seem really good at kind of getting bands that are maybe, I don't know, lost their way, or they're kind of, and they seem to build them up again. There's so many bands like The Enemy and The View, and I could list so many bands that have ended up releasing with Cook and Vinyl. So how did Cook and Vinyl help in kind of Starsailor coming back?
I guess like you say, they just kind of know what they're doing, and they know that audience. They know how to kind of market and push the music to the right people, and they don't overspend either. They don't sort of chuck a ridiculous amount of money at something and hope that it works. It's all very carefully planned and budgeted, and I think that's why it always kind of works. Obviously, there's that sort of crossover with the live thing as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure how else to describe it. It's quite, but I agree. They do have a knack of doing really well with bands who are maybe a bit older or haven't put anything out for a while.
Yeah, but I think it's that way because if you've worked with like a record label for so long and know how to do things, and maybe know how to make so many decisions, to then kind of find yourself in a different situation where you might need to reconnect with a fan base, then I think that's where they help.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is a different skill, um, reconnecting with people than it is sort of finding and building a fan base when you're a new band. And I suppose, sort of putting the hat on of a 30 something, 40 something,
Mhm.
like what are they watching on TV and what radio stations are they listening to?
And this is what I mean.
Um,
What I find with that as well is obviously speaking to a lot of bands. Obviously speaking to Cooler Shaker earlier. I think I mentioned to them about speaking to Mark for the Blue Tones, and bands like yourself that have had such a long career. There is a point where you need to have a break and you go off and have families and things like that. I think there's a worry that the fans won't be there when you come back. But what I've said to all these people is the fans need a break as well. If your fans, if you've got a fan base that are kind of the same age as you, naturally they go and have their families as well, and they'll no go to as many gigs. Because I was the same. There was maybe 10-year period where I never went to gigs, or I went to like 2 gigs a year or whatever. And now I'm at the other end of it where I'm at 2 or 3 a month because we've
yeah,
grown and we've had our kids. So I think that fan base is always there, but they're kind of living the same life as yourself.
yeah, no, I totally get that. I think there's definitely times where you have to sort of dig in and just like maybe accept that you've got to play sort of slightly smaller venues or go a bit
Mm.
further afield, and yeah, sort of leave a long enough gap between tours so that the fact you're not sort of relying on the same. That's one advantage that we've got, having fan bases in different parts of the world. So if there's a year where we can't do the UK because we've done it the year previous, we can
Mhm.
go and do bits in Holland and Belgium and South Korea and places like that.
Yeah. And like bringing that album at 2017, and kind of obviously everything that comes with it, touring and stuff like that. And if there is any plans to kind of release an album soon after that, scuppered with COVID and pandemics and stuff like that. So how did that sort of period affect both the band and your solo stuff?
It was quite good for my solo stuff, to be honest, because I could just out of necessity, really. You can't get together with the band. You just gotta find your kind of creative outlets wherever you can, and then so the sort of Everything Will Be Okay and the Coming Good album sort of came out of that, and it's quite a prolific period for me, just basically writing stuff and throwing it out and seeing if people liked it. And then with the band as well, started writing for the Where the Wild Things Grow album. So by the time they sort of let us out again, there was loads of ideas to get stuck into, and yeah, it's obviously a sort of difficult period for everyone, and it's great to be kind of out the other side of it. It's just a shame that there's sort of turmoil in the world of a different kind now.
Yeah, well, but that's the one guarantee is there's always going to be somebody trying to fuck us over. It doesn't matter what it is. So obviously bringing that album out where the Wild Things Grow came out 2024, then since then and up to now, you get this album coming out on the 30th of January. It's all happening. I've been listening to the album for a couple of weeks, so I've had the pleasure of listening to it through Katie. For the listeners on the podcast, how would you describe this album? How would you sell it to them?
I suppose it's a bit more outward looking than maybe some of our previous albums were very personal. At least sort of 4 or 5 songs on the album that aren't about me for a change. So like Coney Island was inspired by a photograph by Bruce Davidson. Trying to think now. The Great Northwest was written in the aftermath of the Liverpool parade when that maniac sort of drove into all the fans.
Uh-huh.
Just because I picked up on how many messages I saw on social media and things of people saying, "Oh, if anyone's stuck in town, you can come round ours for a cup of tea. If anyone needs somewhere to stay," and just a real like
Yeah.
community kind of reaction to a shocking event. I was just quite touched by uh, especially when there's so much toxicity on social media and it's often used to put people down. It was great to see it being used in a positive way. And then the song Firefly Moments, that was inspired by an audio book I was listening to, where this writer was kind of dealing with her husband's dementia and these like magical moments of lucidity where he was almost kind of back in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess there's always going to be a bit of myself in everything that I do, but I did sort of end up writing quite a few songs that are about other people, like I say, in another situation.
Well, I mean, I particularly like the opener at the end of everything, and I like the way it ends as well. It kind of like fades out, and kind of I take it back and say, "Is that ended or is somebody turned the volume down my phone?" It kind of I don't know. There's something about it. It just did it for me. I thought it was a beautiful song.
Oh, thank you.
So obviously this comes out. The album comes out on the 30th of January. What's the plans after that? Are you touring? Is there anything going on that aspect?
I've already got quite a few gigs in, so I'm playing on the Isle of Wight tonight.
Right.
Got a gig at a brewery in Macclesfield. Wonder if they'll still be in the FA Cup when I go in there. Winchester. Try, I'm doing a few nights at the Sherlocks. Have a pub in Lincoln.
Right.
I'm doing a few nights at their pub in March as well. I think for the next kind of few months, there's gigs here, there, and everywhere, at least every week or every few weeks.
And what about Starsailor? What's the plans for the band?
In October, we're doing a Love Is Here with Strings
Right.
little tour. We'll be in Edinburgh, London, Birmingham, Poole, in Dorset. There's a couple other places. Um, but a kind of an extension of the album that we did with Joe Duddle up in Liverpool. He's doing the arrangement for this Love Is Here tour as well, because it's 25 years of Love Is Here this year. So we're kind
Yeah,
of making the
it's
most
a
of that.
long time, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's sure as fuck that makes you feel old.
Yeah, just a bit.
So I look forward to that. I maybe come and see you in Edinburgh. I don't usually go to gigs in Edinburgh. I've not been to many. Glasgow's more my patch, but I'll look for the Edinburgh dates maybe and see if that works for me.
Yeah, more than welcome.
But so the last part of the podcast, All Time for Heroes, is here. I asked my guest to pick 4 heroes to come for dinner. Why they're your heroes and what would you cook for them? And they can be any aspect of life, musicians, sports people, home stars, family, whatever you like, dead or alive. So yeah, just fire away on that.
I'm trying to think. I suppose I would want to reflect my different kind of passions, I suppose. I would have. It's hard to see past John Lennon. I think just for his, the kind of obviously his musical genius, but also his sort of worldview and stuff.
Yeah, I always think at times like this that the world would be a better place if we had a John Lennon here to kind of speak some truth for us.
Yeah, definitely. It would be interesting to see what he'd make of everything.
Yeah.
I'd have John Lennon, then I'd have probably the writer Murakami, the Japanese writer, because I love his
Hmm.
books and his again, like he's got quite a quirky kind of view of the world and way of writing, and I wonder if that and he's a music obsessive as well, so we'd have some good conversations, I think.
Mm. See,
Kenny
I mean,
Dalglish should have to be there.
just recently watched the new documentary about him as well, which another great watch. Obviously,
Yeah,
I'm a Celtic fan, so we had him for a bit before obviously he came to use. So I'm at that point now where if I was picking heroes, I wouldn't pick a footballer. I fell in love with football the last few months. So, Kenny Dalglish is an absolute brilliant pick as well.
yeah. And I think to kind of redress the balance a bit, because we're quite kind of male heavy at the moment. Joni Mitchell would be in there.
Brilliant,
Yeah, and I think I would cook them a chickpea curry.
right?
It's I'm not a great chef, but as one a curry is
You can't go wrong
one
with a
thing
curry.
that I like the way you can just adjust it as you go as well. It's like, oh, it's not enough. There's not enough of this in it. I'll just chuck a bit more in. It's like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can
you
really,
can.
so a nice chickpea curry.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds amazing. Brilliant guests as well. Kenny Douglas and John Lennon together would be absolute dynamite.
Yeah,
But an absolute pleasure having you on. All the best with album release. Um, reiterate, it's all happening. It's out January the 30th, and all the best with that. All the best with the gigs coming up, and maybe hope to see you in Edinburgh with Starsailor as well. But
yeah.
for coming on the day, thank you very much, James.
No worries. Thank you.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Thanks again for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, please contact me on the email timeforheroespod@gmail.com, or you can get me on Instagram at timeforheroespodcast. Thanks very much. We'll be back soon with another episode.